Today, we're going to take a hard look at one of history's most destructive figures. Using established historical sources, we're going to chart the life, the ideology, and the absolutely catastrophic impact of Adolf Hitler.
So where do you even begin with a subject like this? Well, I think the renowned historian Ian Kershaw put it best. He called Hitler the embodiment of modern political evil. That single phrase really captures the gravity of what we're about to explore.
Here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the man himself, trace his shocking rise to power, see how he built his dictatorship, then look at the war and annihilation that followed, and finally, we'll have to confront his staggering legacy of death.
So, the big question right off the bat is how? How did one person become the central figure of a regime that caused so much devastation?
Let's get the basic facts on the table. Adolf Hitler, born in Austria in 1889, rose to become the absolute dictator of Germany in 1933. He held that power for 12 brutal years, right up until his death at the very end of the war he started.
So how did he get there? His journey from being a decorated but basically unknown soldier in World War I to holding the highest office in Germany is, well, it's a chilling story.
And you can see just how fast this all happened. In 1919, he joins this tiny, obscure political party. Just 2 years later, he's running the whole show. He even tries to overthrow the government in 1923, which fails spectacularly. But then, just a decade later, he's legally appointed Chancellor of Germany. It's an absolutely meteoric rise.
Now you'd think getting thrown in jail for a failed coup would be the end of the road, right? Wrong. For Hitler, it was a massive opportunity. He used his time in prison to write Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, the manifesto that laid out his hateful ideology and his terrifying ambitions for the entire world to see.
So what exactly was he selling to the German people? What was this ideology that so many bought into? It really boiled down to a few core toxic ideas. Pan-Germanism, this idea of uniting all German speakers into one great empire, a vicious, deep-seated anti-Semitism, a fierce opposition to communism, and, of course, relentlessly attacking the Treaty of Versailles, which he used to tap into a deep sense of national humiliation.
And a huge piece of this puzzle, something you absolutely have to understand, is the concept of Lebensraum, or living space. This wasn't just some abstract political theory. It was a concrete plan to conquer huge swaths of Eastern Europe and ethnically cleanse them to make room for German settlers. It was the blueprint for war.
And this is the moment, January 30th, 1933. This is when he gets his hands on real legitimate power. And the truly tragic part, it was handed to him. The conservative elite thought they were so clever that they could control him and use his popularity for their own goals. It turned out to be one of the most catastrophic miscalculations in history.
Okay, so he's in power, and he doesn't waste a single second. Let's look at how he went from chancellor to absolute dictator with terrifying speed.
This right here, this was the kill switch for German democracy, the Enabling Act. It sounds kind of bureaucratic, right? But what it did was give Hitler's government the power to pass any law it wanted without the approval of the German parliament. Just like that, the democratic Weimar Republic was dead, and Nazi Germany, a one-party dictatorship, was born.
And a year later, he sealed the deal. When President Hindenburg died, Hitler just smashed the two top jobs, president and chancellor, into one. He created this new title for himself, Führer und Reichskanzler, leader and chancellor. He was now, officially and completely, the absolute, unquestioned ruler of Germany.
With total control locked down at home, Hitler set his sights on the rest of the world. And what came next was war and a campaign of annihilation on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
The path to World War II wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate plan. Step 1, a massive rearmament program that broke all international treaties. Step 2, on September 1st, 1939, he sends his armies into Poland. And that was the final straw. Britain and France declared war, and Europe was on fire once again.
And you have to understand just how successful he was at first. It was terrifyingly effective. By late 1941, Nazi Germany and its allies controlled a massive empire, stretching from the coast of France to the gates of Moscow and deep into North Africa. To many, it must have seemed like he was completely unstoppable.
But this was never just about conquering land. Underpinning the entire war effort was this sick, racist ideology. They used words like Untermenschen, literally subhumans, to describe entire groups of people they deemed inferior. Jews, Slavs, Roma people. If you can convince your followers that others aren't even human, well, then you can justify doing the absolute unthinkable to them. And that is exactly what they did.
And that brings us to the final and most difficult part of this story. We have to try and quantify the human cost. And the numbers, they're almost impossible to truly comprehend.
6 million Jewish men, women, and children were systematically murdered in the Holocaust. It was a cold, calculated, industrial-scale project of annihilation.
But the killing didn't stop there. Beyond the victims of the Holocaust, the Nazi regime deliberately killed an estimated 19.3 million other civilians and prisoners of war. Poles, Soviet citizens, political opponents, people with disabilities. The list just goes on and on.
And if you zoom out to the entire European war that he started, the total number of dead soldiers and civilians combined comes to a staggering 28.7 million. It is a legacy of death on a scale that is simply hard to wrap your head around.
So how does it all end for him? As his 1,000-year Reich collapsed into rubble after just 12 years, and with the Soviet Red Army just streets away from his bunker in Berlin, he took the coward's way out. On April 30th, 1945, he and his new wife, Eva Braun, committed suicide.
So we've walked through the history, the facts, the horrifying numbers, and it leaves us with this unavoidable question for all of us to think about. What does all of this teach us? What are the real lessons here about the devastating consequences of hate, and just how fragile our democratic institutions can truly be?